All right, y'all thought that I might be fibbing. This is proof right now. The Letterman Podcast. We have one sponsor only, but it is Rupert G and the Hello Deli. Thank you very much for sponsoring our show, Rupert.
It's my honor, Mike.
La, 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 la. Welcome once again to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. All right, Dan Cashman is my guest today. I'm very excited about this. Dan, for almost 20 years, the host of the Nite Show, the last regional talk show, weekly talk show on television, and he finished up his run a couple of months ago at the time of this recording. And his last guest on his show was David Letterman. So there you go. And we talk a lot about that, obviously. Now, Dan, I was going to have Dan on about a year ago, and our schedules we was happening. We were going back and forth. And then suddenly we both went in different directions and we never got back to it again. And then the news came out that he was going to be ending the run. I wanted to have him on, talking about that, because when you watch Dan's show, you can see the fingerprints of inspiration from the work of David Letterman and company all over this show. So the Nite Show, there's tons of clips available on YouTube. I highly recommend going and checking it out, especially, of course, the end episode with David Letterman. But there's been other appearances of Tom Spones Malone, Mike McEntee, phenomenal, one of the driest, funniest people I've ever met, helped write for Dan's show after his run with Late Show ended, which is very cool. Lots of Letterman connections. And again, when you watch the show, you will see what I'm talking about, how the inspiration is just all over this thing. Dan came on here. We had a tremendous conversation. One of the things that he wanted to make sure that we talked about was how much he appreciated everything that his crew, the people who enjoyed his show in the Maine area, all of these people that contributed to the run that they did, the unprecedented run, the unique run of the Nite Show. He's just so grateful, and I love that. He and I are I think I said it in the show after the record light went on. He and I are very much pieces from the same piece of cloth. We're cut from the same piece of cloth, and I just appreciate him very, very much. He is fantastic. You want to see a host of a show? This guy here, this is a real host. Very excited to present my conversation here with, former host, retired host of the Nite Show, Dan Cashman. All right. The first question I got to ask you is, do you prefer Dan or Danny?
That, like most things in my life, comes with a very complicated answer, but I'm going to try and condense it for the purpose of the podcast.
Yes.
And I will say Dan is just fine.
Dan is But it was the Nite Show with Danny Cashman.
Can you figure out why it was the Nite Show with Danny Cashman?
Oh, I went to the automatopoetic resonance that Johnny Carson, like it was the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I that's why I went. That's what I assumed. Is the
You're
answer a little
wrong.
more depth to it?
You're wrong.
Good.
You're right with the two-syllable part, but it's Late Night with David Letterman, and all of the guests called him Dave.
Right.
Very few people called him David. So I thought I got to go with that two-syllable. So you're sort of right with the Johnny part, but very few people called him John on the show. Right. They all called him Johnny. Yep. So it was more the Dave influence.
And we might as well get right into it. No, first off, how long was the run of the Nite Show?
That's also a complicated answer.
Because he started and stopped a couple of times, right? But at the same time, when was the very first incarnation of the Nite Show?
You'll appreciate this. The very first incarnation started on David Letterman's birthday, and that was also calculated April 12th, 1997. And it ran for a couple of years, went away, came back for about a year, and went away. And then the most recent version came back in October of 2010, and that ran until May of 2025.
Incredible that you were able to do that. And I mean, I attribute your tenacity to that of MacGyver, just finding ways to figure out ways to chase this dream and to get it seen somewhere in a way that, I mean, Dave talked about it when he was on your show. He said, anybody could go and do a show in their basement or whatnot. Thank goodness for that. Oh, thank you, internet, because it gave chuckleheads like me the opportunity to do this. But you actually, 20 plus years, whatever it is, we're able to find ways to show up on television locally, whatever, but network as well, local network. What started this? And I mean, you've already referenced Dave, and when I love the fact that we get to do kind of a love letter to the inspiration that Dave gave to so many people, and you took that inspiration and really, really, really took it out for a spin. What have you learned over that time?
I think I reinforced a few things first. I grew up being told that you can do anything you want to do in Maine. You just got to put your mind to it and figure out a way to do it here. And so that was reinforced 1,000 times over by the fact that I was able to do this job I never would have gotten in New York City or Los Angeles. I could do it in Maine. I could do it the way I wanted to do it in Maine. And I did it with a team of people that I've known for a long, long time, some of them since I was a kid,
Yeah,
and people I've grown to respect and love. And I think that's probably the biggest reinforcer that I had. What have I learned? Um, I learned how to roll with the punches, how to be nimble. I learned that no matter how big or small your late night talk show is, you're faced with some of the exact same challenges. I watched a whole lot of the Larry Sanders Show, and I can't tell you how many episodes I was like, that happened to us too. It's crazy when you have a format like this, the things that can happen. I'll give you an example.
please.
The first time our um, most recent governor before the one we have now was on our show. We planned the whole show around him. There were a few monologue jokes about him. There was a comedy bit about him. Our show was a half-hour show, so he had both guest segments as well.
Yep.
He canceled day of. Now, this show is not my job. I had a day job as well. So in preparation for everything for that taping that night, we recorded 3 shows at a time. So I was preparing for 2 other shows, and I get notification about 10:30 that he's not coming, and we record at 6. And so not only was it trying to find another guest, it was trying to find a guest that could either fill 2 segments or find a guest and a musical guest, restructure a comedy bit, and plug in some monologue jokes that would be more applicable. And that's a lot when everybody working on the show also has other jobs. So situations like that reminded me it's like we're doing a real show. We still have to go on with the show. We can't just scrap it. We still have commitments to the stations. And so it taught me how to be maybe overly flexible and use the old adage, the show must go on, because it had to in our case, whether big or small. We had come 6 o'clock, we had to have a show ready that night.
Well, and that makes to the MacGyver point exactly. Puts the exclamation point on that. I'm reminded of the show with on Late Show where Senator McCain canceled on them at the last minute, and so what do we change? What do we keep? Where's our standbys? Tony Randall has already left this earth. Okay, we'll bring Olbermann in. He's our guy. Did you have somebody? Did you have regulars, like people that you could always count on just in case the show went off the rails somewhere, and it's like, okay, no, we've got this backup here that's always in the paddock ready to go, things like that. Did you have that with the Nite Show?
We did. We ended up eventually having some evergreen bits in the can that we could pull from. We did not when this happened. This was within the midst of our first season that this happened. This
Oh
particular
God, it was
so
early on.
it's very early, so we didn't have evergreen bits. We did have, because we had done 2 prior versions of the show, we had some friends that had been on the show, media personalities, other elected officials. That particular night, we happened to get a gentleman by the name of Matthew Dunlap, who was our Secretary of State at the time.
Mhm.
He was a state representative during our old show's run, and he would come on a few times. He was very funny for an elected official, so it was good to pull him in. He had to be. he worked in Augusta, our state capital, so he had to drive an hour and a half to get to us, but he made it work. Um, and we ended up when we had musical guests on, we ended up recording three songs from them. One would air on the broadcast, one would be a web exclusive, and then that third one we would keep in the can, and we would always use it. But it was really helpful if a musical guest canceled last minute because we had this collection at times up to 20 different musical guests that had an extra song that we could use either in case of emergency or if they happened to be playing at some festival and couldn't make it to do a new song with our show. Viewers watching at home, they didn't remember what they wore 2 years prior, the first time they were on. So it looked like a new performance, and it was. It was something that hadn't aired before. So we ended up with all sorts of backup plans. And after we came back to our theater from COVID, we also had backup plan for guest hosting and musicians in our house band and that sort of stuff. So we were an exercise in backup plans that thankfully didn't have to be put into action too much.
You speak about guest host. How many times over the course of your run with the Nite Show did you have to call in somebody to stand in for you?
Never.
Oh, there it is. Never.
Yeah.
And you were weekly, like when the show was clicking, obviously there were breaks and things like that that would happen, due to whatever, whether you're switching a format network, COVID, that kind of a thing. There were natural breaks that would happen throughout that run. But for the most part, when you were running on your sweet spot, you were weekly, right?
Yeah, we actually aired weekly throughout all 15 years, but there were rebroadcasts that happened in there as well because we needed time off. We had a big group of people. This took a small army of people to produce. I never needed a guest host, but we did use a guest host once for our ninth anniversary show. We pulled in John Davidson, who had guest hosted for Johnny Carson 80 something times, more maybe more than that. So we thought, who better to be our only guest host at the time than a guy who had done it dozens of times for the King, and he was great. So he interviewed me about our show for our ninth anniversary, and it was such an honor to have him do that.
Dan, I mean, I'm listening to you talk, and it's almost like we're cut from a different part of the same cloth. I'm a '76 baby. What year were you born?
78.
Yeah, okay. I knew we were real close.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, the David Letterman influence cannot be understated. Dave made a joke about it when he came on your final show, talking about the idea that maybe I think the word he used was corrupted you, growing up. I have certainly been bent. And the kind of bent that I am, I really, really enjoy a little bit of mischief, a little bit of playfulness, a little bit of, definitely some cynicism and sarcasm and whatnot. The influence of that show growing up. Just it does not take very many episodes of the Nite Show, watching a few minutes of it to see the influence that's there. I want to go back a little bit. You said anything, you can do anything in Maine, and I love the thesis of that because you've certainly proved it. Early on, though, safe to say, big dreams. The idea of New York, the allure. Let's go there and see if I can insert myself into the machine there, as opposed to doing whatever I want here. Safe to say that was kind of what the journey looked like.
Yeah, I had an opportunity when I was in between my junior and senior year in college to go to New York City and intern at the Imus show. And it
Yeah.
got me both TV experience and radio experience. The TV side, it was on MSNBC at the time. So I was in Secaucus, New Jersey, 2 days a week. And when it was the 9 o'clock hour, they didn't broadcast that live. So they actually let the interns maneuver the cameras. They were remote controlled cameras. So you get to maneuver the cameras with joysticks and basically produce an hour or direct an hour of the Imus show, which they would then rebroadcast the next morning. They had the opportunity to fix it in post production, of
Yep.
course.
Yep.
It gave interns hands-on experience, but 3 days a week, somebody was on maternity leave that worked for him. So I get to go over to WFAN and be there in the studio with Imus and Lou and Bernard and Charles. And um, I loved it. I thrived on the city. New York City has such an energy to it. It is still my second favorite place in the world, and I say that as a diehard Red Sox fan. Like it is still my second favorite place in the world. My favorite place in the world happens to be Eastern Maine, and I realized that about 3 weeks in. As I was walking through the streets of Manhattan, I remember hearing just the general traffic and the hustle and bustle, and I was listening to it, thinking how much I loved it, and there was just something about it that made me remember, God, I love Maine though. And when I came back here, finished my last year of college,
Hmm.
friends of mine were like, "You must have hated New York. You love it here too much." And I was like, "No, no, it's my second favorite place, but
Yeah.
Eastern Maine is first, and they are so different." But the plan, I think that's when the plan was sort of crafted in my mind that I would stay in Maine and do whatever I could do here.
Hmm.
And that plan was put to the test about a year later. An up and coming late night guy, you might have heard of him, Jimmy Kimmel. Um, I got a job offer from him directly. I still had the email to be a production assistant on The Man Show, and it was in LA.
Whoa.
Yeah, and there was a writer's strike looming, and he basically said, you might be out of a job in a few months if that happens. If that doesn't scare you, we'd love to offer you the position. And it didn't. I wouldn't say that that scared me, but it did make me very nervous to go that far away from my favorite place when I had a job here, my family was here, everything was here. And I said, why would I do that? Maybe there's something that will happen down the road, but I really like here. Why would I give that up? And so I had this little crossroads of life moment where I decided to stay here in Maine, and I haven't looked back. It's been great.
I gotta ask because okay, so was there ever aspirations for radio? I know I understand, you put your foot in the door into any internship or program or anything like that that you possibly can, but was there ever a pull towards radio? Because I think about that, Kimmel and Carolla, they were radio guys at that point that were kind of making the jump over. I think Jimmy at that point had win Ben Stein's money, but the idea is like, okay, there are these people that have this potential common, and certainly Kimmel's adoration for Letterman, that kind of a thing, must have been a very difficult choice. I mean, I get the idea of being home and nostalgia, your favorite place. That's beautiful the way that you framed that. But at the time, and you think about chasing your dreams, you think about how old you were, that kind of a thing. That must have been a really, really weighted decision at that point.
Yeah, it was. There was a pull for radio. I was actually working in radio at the time, and the
Yeah.
reason I got that job offer from Jimmy is because my boss in radio was morning show partners with Jimmy in Tucson and Tampa, and I
Uh,
want to say one other market. And so he was still friends with him, and that's how that connection was formed. And it was. I loved working in radio at the time, but I could see it was changing
mhm.
quickly and not in a way that benefited creativity. I also I figured at that point in time, so the second version of our show ran from 2001 to 2002, and I worked in radio till 2005.
Right.
And I figured at that point in time, there was just nothing more to be done. I just figured I had fun, I did it. I'm going to go work in another career path, and that's what I did. And I think if you had asked me if the Night Show would ever come back, I would have wagered all of my life savings that it never would. So I would have lost that bet in a terrible way. But I did enjoy working in radio. I don't know that I was very good at it. And I say that not to be self-deprecating, but I think I wanted to do things that I found to be fun and creative. And I don't know that was in the best interests of getting the most listeners for the longest period of time, for a top 40 station, especially. Like it just wasn't, I don't think, I don't think where I was at jived well with the audience we were trying to target.
Yeah, you didn't have room to play the way that you wanted to play.
Yeah. But I tried
So
to force it in, and turns out nobody wanted to hear it.
are we talking about some of this Letterman sensibility? Like is it what was it, what were examples of some of the things you wanted to maybe do that you couldn't do? Was it just you talk about creativity? Do you remember any of the things that frustrated you in that?
Yeah, so I shouldn't say that I couldn't do them. It's just that our ratings kept sinking. So I could tell people weren't liking them. I did a live remote from the men's room of our station. I thought it would be funny. I still think it was funny actually, but
It is funny. It's
because we
fantastic.
it was sort of a parody of like we'd have to go do a live remote like at Sears,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
Sears we got their jeans are in today, so come on down to Sears. And it was just they pay us for it, but it was just not great for radio. So I said, all right, well the station's going down the toilet. Let's do a live remote from the men's room and see it happen. And so, like for 3 hours, an afternoon for 3 hours, I sat in our men's room on the first floor of our radio station and did a remote with the afternoon guy on the air. And I don't know, like nobody mentions it to me now, so I don't know if anybody even heard it. But there was that. I would try to do some promotions to give away tickets to things that just they didn't make any sense for the format that we were playing, but I
Yeah.
liked them. I talked a lot about game shows, and we were targeting like our target audience was 18 to 34-year-old females. And I don't think there were a lot of 18 to 34-year-old females who were like really vastly interested in the rerun library of Card Sharks. But that's what I was talking about. So between the latest Chingy record and the latest Nelly record. So it just didn't, I was a fish out of water. I
Yeah.
probably stayed there a little too long.
Okay. You were painting a beautiful picture about the Letterman sensibility that was clearly hardwired into you as your wiring developed. So at what point did you say, okay, we can do a local talk show. Let's make this happen. Who did you talk to? How did you make it happen? How old were you at the time for context? Because you were not an old guy at all when it came to you were a kid essentially doing this. Did you have people right away that kind of said, yes, we'll carry this flag with you, Dan, and let's do this? How did it happen?
Yeah, so this was 1997. I was 19 years old when it started, 18 when I started talking about it. And it started with I was the mascot for a minor league baseball team in Bangor, and the team was trying to get a kids' TV show on television on this WB affiliate. So
Okay.
I went to the general manager in my Babe the Blue Ox costume with the head off, and I said, I have an idea for a TV show. And they said, sure, but I had to pay for it.
Mhm.
So I thought, being a young go-getter, 18, 19-year-old, I thought, of course, I can sell ads on this thing. It's on television. Everybody wants to be on television. So I racked up a sizable amount of debt, but we got the show on the air, and that's what matters. And it did sort of have to become a MacGyver type thing because um, the costs associated with it were the production costs. This is before you could record anything on phones.
Mhm.
So we had actual cameras, which we still used, by the way, more recently. But um, and we did it at a off-site location from their studio. So we also had to use their mobile production truck, and all of that came with a cost.
I was gonna say that ain't cheap back
No,
then.
definitely not. And
'Cause
then we
even
had
now, that's not cheap. That's okay.
it
And
was
unions and all that sort of stuff involved with it. Like you're
no.
okay.
No, not there were not unions involved because it was a family-owned business. So it was
Gotcha.
like the husband was on one camera, the wife was directing. They did have a couple of employees on a couple of other cameras. Somebody was running audio from our side. So they were not equipped to do this. So we jerry-rigged it together very much MacGyver style. As time went on and we realized we couldn't afford the production truck, we started shooting with one camera and editing it together in post with like cutaway shots. Um, and that stayed for a while. This went on for about 2 years and a month, but the group of people that were helping me were friends of mine from high school and early college. Our announcer became our announcer because he hitched a ride with me to the pilot shooting of it, and he said, "Do you have an announcer of your show?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You need one, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I probably should." And so he said, "I'll do it." And then he hand wrote copy on the way to the studio. We shot the pilot in a studio, and then he was the announcer for 2.5 years.
Wow.
So it became this thing. Television back then was not what it is now. That was the only way to get in front of people visually. That was it. Um, and you would still be found by people flipping around with the remote. The program guide was not, you couldn't hit a button and get the program guide. It was on a channel and you'd have to watch it scroll through. So people did happen upon the show quite a bit. So it was kind of the cool thing to do that a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds were working on this. And literally jerry rigging together a television production, which by today's standards, there is
Yeah.
no way it would ever appear on television. And I'm still shocked it appeared on television 28 years ago. But that's how it started.
Um, yeah, a lot of comparisons to Wayne's World, I would think at the time, things like that, right? Like
Yeah.
but kind of the feel to it too, though, right? Like there's like a lot of people out there when it comes to music and things like that, like the indie sort of a thing. And I mean, it feels like you had that spirit, a little bit of punk rock, a little bit of kind of independent entertainment at that point, and those types of people would have globbed onto it. Safe to say?
Yeah. The Wayne's World reference was one that I think the first article that anybody wrote about our show, the headline was Schwing, Wayne's World meets Letterman and something, something, something.
How did that make you okay? How did that make you feel? Like was it because in the body of the article you talked about your adoration for what Dave and company were doing? Is that where that came? It made the headline though. That must have felt pretty damn cool.
It did. Just having a headline at all felt pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
this was the Bangor Daily News, and newspapers were different back then too. I mean, that was the paper of record for my hometown, for
Yeah.
my area, for my state, and it was front page above the fold in the arts and culture section of the paper, and that was such a big deal. I remember when it came out, and I was walking around like just like I own the city, and nobody else thought that, by the way, but I felt pretty good.
Oh, absolutely. You had some
So
swagger.
yeah, exactly. So it felt pretty good that it had that level of exposure. It felt pretty good that people took notice, and yeah, it it sort of offset the negativity I was feeling about how am I going to pay for this because people are not buying into this like I thought they would, and
Right.
also selling ads for anything is hard.
Yep.
So it was. It was a real shot in the arm to kind of keep things going when I was starting to get kind of down about it. So it certainly helped.
Oh man, I got some questions about the process, but I also have questions about your mentality. I'll go for the mentality first. Did you have imposter syndrome?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
The every so a lot of our guests back then, the biggest guest we had on back then was strangely Don McLean, the guy who sang American Pie, and also Vincent, Starry Starry Night. Like pretty well regarded singer songwriter Don McLean was on our
Yeah.
show 9 or 10 shows in 1997. Um, these days, by the way, stuff has come out about him that our booking department has not reached out to him in a long time, nor would we. However, back
Yeah.
then,
Well,
uh,
it's a different culture. People
different
don't
time,
understand. Yeah.
nobody knew these things
No.
that had happened. So.
And I would submit to you that back then, as we grew up, even if people knew some of those things, it might have been overlooked in certain places and whatnot. It didn't have the microscope or the magnifying glass necessarily. Some of these things that are out there about people that they are
Yeah.
now. I would throw that out there as well.
That's possible, although I would like to think that even back then these things wouldn't have been overlooked. I
Gotcha.
don't
Yeah.
know if I had known then what I know now, I don't know that we would have booked him back
Oh,
then.
fair enough. Fair enough.
It was,
But
it
yeah,
was
I mean, it sings an iconic. Even back then, that song was iconic.
yeah, it was a
Yeah,
big deal. And
absolutely.
later that year,
Episode 9, you said?
yeah, 9 or 10, he was performing, he was doing a concert in Orono, Maine, which was one town over from Old Town where I grew
Yep.
up. And so we reached out to his people and said, can we have him on while he's here? And they were like, well, he lives in Maine. Do you want him on before so he can promote the concert? I said, oh, absolutely. And so he did not know what he was getting into. He didn't know that there would be an audience. He didn't like it was a whole thing. But he was the biggest guest that we had on at the time.
Yep.
And most of our people though were like local media personalities who I grew up watching. Bangor is a type of market where there's a lot of people that come in and leave within a couple of years, but there's also a lot of people who have been here for 25, 30,
Ugh.
35 years because it's home.
Yep.
And some of those people that had been here for a long time, I really respected, had them on the show. And I had tremendous imposter syndrome. And when I look back now at those early tapes, I had every right to have imposter syndrome. I
Yeah.
was not good at this.
Yeah.
It gave me a platform where some people were watching enough to keep it on television, but not a lot of people, so that we weren't steamrolled off the air.
Right.
Uh, it was a good training ground to later sort of hone the skills to be comfortable with how I was running and hosting a show. But yes, that imposter syndrome, that's a really long way around the barn of answering. Yes, that was a
No,
very,
I know exactly what you're talking about. For this show here, I did not anticipate for what, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I really am proud of the people that we've had on this show. I'm not necessarily proud of myself or any of that sort of stuff. But episode 7, I had Tom Dreesen on,
mm,
and I thought before then, I did not know that that was going to happen as quickly as it did. It was a dream to have him and Altman and some of these, and I still got a list of some of these people from the Comedy Store days that I still want to have on. But having Dreesen on that early, um, gave me a couple like holy crap kind of feel, and I still to this day suffer the imposter syndrome. I mean, so back then I can imagine, because I am one of these people in the basement doing this thing. It didn't have advertisers and all of these people around me, and the local community like you talked about. I can imagine that when the gravity did hit, I mean, perhaps even a little bit too much naivete or ignorance early on for you, but when the gravity did hit, it must have hit like a freight train. Now that being said, also, I want to talk about the process back then, or the process, depending on your version of the word. Was back then, were you also doing the day job thing while you're financing this, kind of dream project, selling ad space and doing all of these things? What were you doing as a career back then? And it must have been incredibly difficult to balance all of it.
it was not because I was a college student back then.
Oh, you
So
were still in college at that point. You had not.
was.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had these pockets of time in between classes. So if I had 11 to 1, I could go shoot a sketch on campus or wherever.
Mhm.
So I had a camcorder with me at all times. And it was relatively easy. I also was spending time working at the TV station in order to pay down my debt. So that was another way I MacGyvered my way out of the debt.
And
So
gaining skills at the same time without maybe knowing it or not even knowing it.
no, I knew it. I recognized how lucky I was. I was running master control.
Oh
So
man, yeah.
basically I was sitting there watching television, inserting commercials, and it was none of it was automated. There was not a computer. Like we had tapes, so it was hands-on, but there were also 10, 15-minute windows of time, sometimes a half an hour, where I could edit sketches together on their edit bay, which was in the same room. So that made it much easier. The way I made money back then was that same job as a mascot for the minor league baseball team. So that was a summer job that allowed me to go enjoy watching baseball and run around and act like a goofy blue ox. And I also would go do appearances at during the off season at schools and like youth groups, festivals. So that was enough to kind of put a little extra money in my pocket to live, if you will,
Yeah.
and the other stuff I did for purely for experience.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Let's fast forward for a couple of years here. At what point was there a watershed moment where you're walking down the street, you get recognized? Certain people. I assume the show had people who globbed onto it quickly. You had for lack of a better term, fans or enthusiasts who kind of attached themselves to the show. Early on, was there a moment where you realized, Matt, we're doing something here?
Yeah, I think we were poking fun at a guy named Vince Bavacqua. He was a local news anchor, and we were poking fun at him for two reasons. One, the station he was on would not let people from that station come on our show
Oh boy. Okay.
because we
Yep.
were a competing station. There was nothing competitive about what we were doing. So we latched onto that and poked fun at the station mostly, but also him because of his name.
Clearly a stage name. Bavakwa, is that the name here?
No, that was his real name.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. Eight
Yep.
consonants in a row.
So
It sounds like in that one. Bavakwa, that's great.
yep.
Uh-huh.
So we got some we made a sign. We were in the 4th of July parade and we made a sign for the float that said the year of the Bavacqua and like had it on the very front of the flatbed truck. And the news crew from the station, I see them running in front of the truck and getting video of the sign. And I'm like, oh, this isn't good. So fast forward again, and he leaves the station. He got another job somewhere, and he came on our show
Perfect.
and
Yep.
got newspaper attention. And people were like, "Whoa, Vince is going on your show!" And I was like, "Oh, so this gained steam in a way that I didn't think anybody was paying any attention until he gave us a little bit more of an end of the story." And he said in that interview that the station he was going to was actually making him change his name to Lewis. And I said, "Oh, so you're going to be Louis Bavacqua?" And he laughed like it was a very that was the moment that I was like, okay, maybe I'm getting okay at this job. Maybe
Yep.
maybe this like but that was also that version of the show lasted 2 years and a month, and that was well over a year into it. So we were on the tail end of doing the show when that all happened.
Well, still, that is, I mean, as you're retelling this amazing event, that is so Letterman-esque. But you being you and being you in your favorite place in the world, like you're combining, it's worlds colliding perfectly in Dan Cashman's world. Like, what a beautiful example of some of the things that you did in the show that were Letterman-esque, and you being able to be that guy that's moving the ball down the field, whatever field it is, it doesn't really matter. You're. I assume that is you being. It's the opposite of imposter syndrome. That's you being your authentic self when that happens. I assume.
Yeah, I have a couple of quotes taped to a computer behind me, and I'm gonna botch them.
Yep.
But one of them I think was from Jimmy Kimmel, and it said, "As simple as it sounds, I've just always tried to be myself." And I that post-it note has followed me to different offices. And I want to say I found that quote just before starting this version of the show. It might have been after that, but just
Mhm.
before starting the most recent version of the show. So I took that to heart. I'm not a good actor. I've tried acting. I'm not
Mhm.
a good actor.
Mhm.
Um, I think if I tried to act like somebody else doing this show, people would see through it. Or
Yep.
at the very least, I would think people are seeing through it. And that would throw me off. I have to be myself. And I guess I'm fortunate that I was brought up to be curious about things, to have a genuine curiosity about things, to try and have a good sense of humor, not only about everything around you, but also, and most importantly, about yourself.
Mhm.
And to try and think differently about things. And there are lots of things. I think one of the things that uh, I had imposter syndrome about until the very end is that we didn't reinvent the format.
Right.
Um, we stuck to what Johnny did and what Dave did, but a half hour version. And we didn't do what Mulaney's doing,
Hmm.
do an after midnight thing. Like we stuck to the basic blueprint. And I felt a little bit like we're just doing what everybody else did. But then I remind myself that everything that goes within the walls of that house,
Hmm.
we are building from the ground up every single episode. Every episode starts from scratch. And whether that's us doing a show from a bus or doing a show from a lake or doing it from a contest winner's house,
Yep.
or doing it in the theater, there has to be some version of a monologue, and we always start from scratch with that. Some
Yep.
version of a comedy sketch, we always started from scratch with that. And then how we produced the guest segments, whether there was a lot that went into it or just leaning heavily on my genuine curiosity about the guest and what they're doing. We started from scratch with that, and that could go off the rails any number of ways. And we managed to keep it every episode different and fresh. We never did an episode where any of our regulars that came to see the show or viewers would say, this is starting to get stale. You're doing the
Hmm.
same thing every week. That comment, we had plenty of complaints, don't get me wrong. That one was never lobbed our way. People always felt like they were getting something different, fresh, new when they came to see our show, and hopefully when they watched our show as well.
You and I were going to do this about a year ago, and then it just, for whatever reason, it didn't happen. I'm so grateful that we're doing it now, for a variety of reasons. Number one, and you've just done a beautiful example of talking about the reflection, because you are talking about it in the past tense, already 2 months into it being the past. I mean, the obvious question, you asked it to Dave when he was on. I can imagine you must miss it already.
I don't yet, and I think that's because this is the time of year we're always in reruns anyway. Um,
Gotcha. Still
about
feels
a
like
month,
vacation or
yeah,
dark
about a
times.
month
Yep.
from now, I would normally start booking guests and start shooting sketches.
Yep.
I've come up with a few sketches that I thought, oh, I mean, I guess I could do it for YouTube, but
Comedy we would have done tomorrow night, that kind of a thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
I didn't. I haven't gotten to the point yet where I thought, oh, I should go shoot it anyway and put it on YouTube. I don't think we're there yet. But no, I don't miss it yet, and I think I probably would if not for the way we ended it. Um,
Yeah.
if you're writing a story, if you're writing a book, if you're an author, and you can come up with a beginning and a middle, but you're really agonizing over that end, and
Hmm.
you never quite get the right ending, chances are you're not going to finish that book,
Hmm.
and it's just going to sit there. But if you come up in a dream with the perfect ending, you're anxious to write it down, and then you have a great book, and you're very satisfied with it. There is no better way we could have ended this show than having David Letterman on. It was a
Hmm.
dream in 1997. It was a dream in 2025. And he came on, and you've referenced it, so I know you've seen it. He was every ounce of Dave that anybody could have asked him or wanted him to be. He was
Hmm.
engaging. Every last detail I was worried about. And he knocked it out of the park because he's David Letterman. I was worried, is he going to wear a suit or is he going to come out here in his Carhartts? Because
Yep.
this is the last episode. I didn't ask him to wear a suit, but I was like, I really hope he does because this is a big deal for us.
Yep.
And he did. And I mean, I am my own worst critic. And there was one question I wished I had asked him, but I just couldn't wedge it in.
Hmm.
Other than that, I have no notes. I mean, could somebody
Yep.
else have done it better? Probably. But knowing in the moment that I have been a fan of his since I was 9 years old, and not just a fan. I mean, you and I would probably compete pretty well on a David Letterman game show,
Yes.
but there were plenty of people, especially in this town, I would blow him out of the water. Like I
Yep.
know too much about this man
Yep.
and
Yep.
his career. So the fact that I didn't cry or wet myself when he was there
Yep.
is a win for me. And I don't have any. I don't look back on it and say, "Oh, I wish we had done this differently or that differently, or I wish he had done that." I mean, everything worked out exactly the way I could have possibly hoped, and then and more. So I think for that reason, I don't miss it because it's like hitting a grand slam in your final at
Yep.
bat. You know,
Yep.
how do you how do you miss that?
Well, and when you're chasing a dream and the dream organically comes up with the most perfect conclusion, I mean, how many people are given that opportunity in their life, with anything, and never mind the idea that you got to be present during that moment. The idea you didn't have any notes does not surprise me at all. I can relate to that. I believe that if I had a conversation with him, I would be able to do, something similar just because. And I also understand the idea of being present. I'm super curious of the question that you wish that you could have wedged in, though. Of course, I got to ask.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it's haunting you, though. It sounds like you were able to kind of be in that moment and enjoy it the way that you did. Dave clearly, not just, dressed in a suit and whatnot, Dave clearly came with stuff. It was lovely to see. And it was funny because as he came out, I was watching it and going, okay, clearly Dave's prepped for this and he's ready. Um, in my vantage point, or my, just in case you weren't. But then when you look at the way the dialogue happened and the rat-a-tat happened and how many spontaneous lines you came up with, and I was like, okay, did McEntee help him with that one in the back? No, no, that's Dan just throwing it back, making Dave laugh, making the audience laugh, and you did the pitch coming down the plate. You hit it, and not just hit it, you did hit it out of the park. But I am curious about the question.
That's very kind of you to say. And I'm gonna before I get to the question, I'm gonna
Yes,
tell you
sir.
two things. One, I don't know if you knew this, but McEntee was in the audience that night. First time he had ever been to our show, and just like everyone else in the audience, he didn't know Dave was coming. So
What?
yeah, I didn't tell him. Dave clearly didn't tell him. I didn't. So this was a surprise to our entire audience, except for maybe half a dozen people, 10 people. Um, not
How
many
did you
people.
keep that from? Okay, yeah, I got yo. This is
So
okay. Yeah.
he's written for us since
Yes,
Letterman retired. And I kept telling him, you got to come up and see a show. You got to come up and see a show. Finally, he's like, all right, we'll be there for the last show. The
because
last
it's the
two
last
shows.
show. That's how he ends up in the. Okay. Yep.
Yep. So he and his wife came, and we had certain people that had assigned seats. And I made sure he had an assigned seat in the second row because Dave knew he was going to be there. Because I told him, or I told his people. And I wanted to make sure that if he wanted to say hi to him, he wasn't like way in the back.
Right.
So we gave him an assigned seat in the second row. And I made eye contact with two people after I announced him. And one was a good friend of mine that I work with who is just as much of a super fan as I am. And the other one was Mike. And Mike had this look on his face, unlike any time I've ever seen him in the past. So that was wonderful. But the other
Oh,
thing,
and that's great to crack him. I've only been in the same room with him once, and every once in a while we share conversations and whatnot. But to crack that guy must have had its own little piece of satisfaction in your mind too. That's
it was great. It was so great. And then the second piece of that is again the camaraderie with Dave that I didn't expect. He told me backstage later he had a question that he wanted to ask me and he forgot to. And I'm thinking to myself, I had one too. But the
yeah.
question I had was, um, did he miss doing the Late Show? Not because he gave up comedy, because you can do comedy anywhere, but because he's a broadcaster at heart. And
Yeah.
what he gave up was the ability to broadcast 5 nights a week. And I would love to hear his take on that. I
Yeah.
would love to hear if he's thought that. I would love to hear if he has any insight to that. I would love to hear if it's not that.
Mhm.
But I was genuinely curious about that. I planned no questions for him because I knew going into this I would have more than enough material,
Yep.
not only with my own questions, but also because I've seen him on other shows before and I've studied it before I even knew he was coming. I
Yep.
knew he would come out prepped with the first set of questions. He
Yep.
would be the guy leading that interview when he came out, and he was.
Yep.
Uh,
That's right. Yeah, that's what I was talking about here, where he's a freight train, and
yep.
the good news is so are you, and you were able to run parallel with him at the same speed, but he came out of the gates at full speed, and that was very very obvious. Was that and that wasn't at all surprising to you? You were ready for that. You were ready that he was going to be loaded for bear. He was going to have his material on Bangor. He was going to be ready. You were ready for that. even though maybe not specifically the content.
Not specifically, you're right. I was ready that he was going to I was prepared if this wasn't the case, but I was expecting that he would lead that conversation coming out of the gate.
Yep.
When we came back from break, there was this moment when he first came out that I slipped out of Showdan very briefly. And then I was like, I got to pull myself together. Yes,
Yep.
that's David Letterman, but I got to host this thing.
Yep.
So I went back into show mode. And then when we came back from break, I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was still in show mode, but I let my guard down for a minute. This would be the one note that I have actually, is he said, "See, you're not retiring, but you're going to your A
To
gig."
your other gig. Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, my A gig." And then I started rambling. I was like, "My C gig, my D gig," because I got two other things I do too.
Hmm.
And then I was in my head, I'm like, Cashman, what the frig are you talking about?
Yeah.
You're doing an interview with David Letterman. Don't ramble.
Right.
So I quickly pivoted and got that back on track. But there was just a moment where I grew out of uh, being composed and started just being a rant like I'm on a first date. That's how my
Yeah.
first date. I'll just
Yep.
start rambling about things nobody cares about. I'm back into talking about card sharks all of a sudden. Just it doesn't go well.
Uh, okay. So you get out of that moment and then it just feels, to me, watching it, it feels organic. It really does. But I was curious, like one of the questions I wanted to ask is, was anything segment produced, quote unquote, with him at all? Like was there any, how much, how much time did you have with him beforehand? Did you pull a Dave and not meet him at all beforehand? Like how did that part of the process work? I still can't believe you kept it from Mac. I came in here, Dan. Honestly, I came in here thinking Mac, you called in a favor with McEntee, and that's how you got Dave. That, like, to me, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it makes sense that would happen. I'm still blown away. Did you just reach out, through normal channels, go to Dave's team and basically do it that way? How did you make it happen?
That is
Okay.
a long answer, and I'm not even sure it's that exciting, but I can whittle it down to a few things. One,
Okay.
we have some really good friends of our show who we have mutual friends with, and I think it just the right conversations happened with the right people at the right time. This was not the first time we had asked.
Right. Okay.
I think the
I know a
time
little bit about that, as you can imagine.
So the timing just happened to work out. I think given that we were the last local late night show like this in the country,
Yep.
that happened to help. The fact that we were going away happened to help, and I was pretty open about the fact that I was struggling with it, and I genuinely was.
Yep.
The closer it got, the more seller's remorse I had. And I was thinking, I know this is the right thing to do, but what am I going to do about this and
Yep.
this and this and this? Um, but to your question before that, um, I've read enough about Dave. I know that he never interacted with the guests before the show or never
Yep.
wanted. So that I adopted that. And unless it was a good friend of mine who I see all the time, because Bangor is a small town,
Yep.
um, I would never go into a dressing room or encounter somebody backstage unless it was while the theme song was playing and I was waiting to go out and I'd see them standing across the way. I'd go over and shake hands, but it was so loud I couldn't talk to them. So I'd at least
Mhm.
shake hands and then I'd go do my thing. Um, so they told me that he would not want to interact with me before the show because he does that with everybody. And I said,
Mhm.
I know. And then they told me a second time and a third time. And I said, listen, I don't want to freak you out, but I do the same thing because Dave does it. So
Yep.
that's how I learned to be a talk show host. Don't interact. Let that first encounter happen on stage. And they said, oh, okay, so you get it.
Mhm.
So I did. But we did have a segment producer talk to him and his people beforehand. So yes, there were things that were segment produced in terms of we brought up the fact that he had called Bangor, Maine years ago in a
Yep.
segment on late night because nobody here was watching late night. Um, he knew we would bring that up. I think we told him we'd like to call somebody.
Okay.
Well, we did not tell him who.
Okay, I
Uh,
was gonna say because you called a local politician and
we
he
did.
didn't know. Okay, yep, yep.
And the local politician didn't know it would be David Letterman calling. I get nervous about an hour before showtime, and I looked in the phone book and I was like, "Oh my God, all of these are businesses. There are no residential numbers in this phone book anymore."
Right.
And so I went through my own personal listing of numbers, and every person I knew within the city limits of Bangor was going to be at the show. And I was like, "What? Who do I call?" And so I found this guy, and so I wrote it down in the phone book. And I texted him and I said, "Hey, if you get a phone call from a number you don't recognize after 8 o'clock, can you just please answer it? I can't tell you why." So he didn't know, like he knew to pick up the phone. He
Yeah.
didn't know anything else.
That's just
Um,
good producing right there because you want to make sure the bit doesn't fall flat, that it goes to voicemail like so many these days do. It's a
yeah.
different culture now than it was back then. You just want to make sure that you get the same spirit of the old culture and yeah, no, that's yep. I
And the
get it.
way the bit was originally conceived was we were going to call a random number in the phone book
Yeah.
until I opened the phone book 2 hours before we taped and said, "Oh no, how are we going to work this out? There's going to be no dentist office open at eight
No.
o'clock at night on a
Yeah.
Wednesday." But other than that, I mean, he knew that I was struggling. He knew that I was struggling with giving the show up. And I think based on what he said to me during the show and after the show, I think that I don't think appealed is the right word, but I want to say that that resonated with him. Like
Yeah.
he could feel that, and I mentioned in the letter that I sent, there aren't many people you can talk to about this.
Yeah.
Certainly nobody locally.
Yeah.
And the people that are doing it now actively are too busy. And so why not the guy that I looked up to from the age that I was old enough to stay up and watch one of his shows?
Yeah.
And you know, the guy clearly has a heart and a fondness for late night, and he came and he did. He made me feel a whole lot better about it, both just by his mere presence, but also because of the things he said on camera and off camera, that meant this is a lofty term, but meant the world to me. It really, truly, genuinely did. He will never know how much of a shift he single-handedly gave me in my mindset uh, about moving on from this show. I think he saved me a whole lot in therapy bills because
Yeah.
just his words. I hope I never forget them. I hope I never ever forget them.
I can feel the gratefulness through the ones and zeros right now. I can totally feel it, and it's lovely. Um, you cracked the code, and like you think about the idea of cracking a code, whether it's one of those, padlocks that has four numbers on it, and you get the four numbers right, and then suddenly the thing unlocks. And that's kind of the analogy that hits my head as you're talking about this. And then the result of cracking that code, that opening up that lock, is that you level up. Let's move it over to a video game kind of a thing, and then suddenly you're two sizes bigger than you were previously, just leveled up, and it feels like that happened for you in a conversation, in a resolution, in all of these things. Now, that being said, do you remember the first thing I go back to the I keep going back to the McEntee thing because he's so funny. He's so great. He's a guy that I just have been trying to crack in this show here for so long. I saw him at Rupert's retirement. He's such a great guy. Do you remember what he said? What was his first couple notes or whatever to you after everything? The first opportunity you had to talk to him, other than
After
congratulations.
Dave came,
Yeah, after Dave.
yeah. We taped the show with Dave on a Wednesday.
Yeah,
That was our penultimate show, last one with the guest, and then we taped our
yeah,
final show on Saturday. And he and
yeah.
his wife were here for both. So we had dinner together Thursday, and he and his wife both agreed that it was a big surprise, but they weren't surprised at all, knowing Dave. Uh,
Gotcha.
so they thought it was great. They thought the whole thing went great. They thought it was very appropriate and very much David Letterman and the very every aspect of Dave that they came to know and love. Being Mike being there for so many years and
Hmm.
Denise kind of seeing it from afar but close up at the same time,
Yep.
um, which made me feel really good. It made me feel like it wasn't um, the fact that it seemed appropriate for him to do it and this may not have been how they intended it, but it made me feel like what we had built here, this wasn't just a pity visit. This was a visit because he knew what potentially he knew what I was going through, but also liked what we were doing.
Yep.
Um, and that was really meaningful. And Mike, it's funny with Mike, he when he first started writing for us, one of the first jokes I told from him in the monologue spot was right around the same time that I had acquired this, a piece of the Ed Sullivan Theater floor.
Yep.
You have yours?
Mine's just a teeny one, but yes,
Yeah.
I now have floor tile envy, but that's all right. That's all right.
Well, I think I didn't know that there were smaller versions, but I did say when I got it that I was going to use it as a monologue marker. So that's why this piece of blue tape is here.
Oh
So
my God.
my monologue marker on the floor of the Gracie Theater. I would stand on this every night. So it was right after I got this. And one of the guests we had that night sitting with the band was Tom Bones Malone.
Yep.
So I'm standing there, I deliver a joke standing on this from Mike McEntee, and I look in the monitor after I deliver it, and the cutaway is of Tom laughing. And I'm like, I don't know that it gets much better than this.
Yep.
And I think I told Mike that story. I might not have, but I think I told Mike that story. The the respect for not only Dave, but the entire late show franchise or franchises is through the roof. So when something like that happens,
Yep.
it makes me realize just how fortunate I was and have been with this show.
You segued so beautifully into the exact spot that I wanted to move. I was going to say over the years, as your show, gained steam and as you started to build and whatnot, you had a whole bunch of Letterman adjacent or Letterman moments that would attach themselves to your show. And I was going to ask about Bones. We had him on early. Actually, I want to have him on again. Now that I've gotten a little bit better at this as well. He's such a great guy. I wanted to ask about some of those things, and you segued so beautifully into that. Your monologue spot, that's borderline precious, man. That is really, really beautiful. What were some of the moments over the years where your show intersected with the Letterman culture?
Yep. So that's a big one. We've had Eddie Brill on a few times
Yeah, he's so
over the
great.
years who not only had done stand up, but he would do stand up. He would do gigs while he was here too. So we get to see him in action. I've seen him in New York as well. But
Isn't he one of the sweetest humans walking the earth?
100%
Just
genuine. Yep,
I just
that guy.
adore Eddie. Yep.
Um, we did a tribute to Dave the Saturday before his final show that aired. All of our stations in Maine they have sister stations that are CBS affiliates or they are CBS affiliates. So we got all three CBS affiliates to run it at the same time, and that was nice. So we had this tribute show to Dave where we had an interview with a friend of mine who was on Beat the Clock at Joe G's Pizza at one point, and he recounted that whole experience.
Yep.
Had an interview with Eddie about working there, and we talked to all sorts of Maine media personalities and comedians about their memories of Dave, and that was kind of neat.
Yeah.
We had the on eBay. I bought like a confetti blower
Yeah.
that was used at the Ed Sullivan Theater to blow confetti onto the stage. So we did a whole segment. It came, and I handed it off to our partners at the New England School of Communications at Husson University, and I said, "Have the kids try to figure this out, and I'll bring them on, and they can do the confetti thing." And so we did a whole bit around how the confetti blower worked,
Yep.
and it's funny how elementary it was. The way it worked was it was just a fan,
Yep.
and people would drop confetti from the rafters and the fan would blow the confetti all over the stage. So what I bought off of eBay was just this like piece of junk fan that happened to be used at the Ed Sullivan
That had
Theater.
some lineage to it because of where it was used. Yep. Yep.
Exactly. So that's still in my closet here, by the way. I'm never selling that.
No way.
Um,
Yep.
and then I think one of the biggest non-guest moments is I did get a supply of these blue cards, authentic Dave Letterman blue cards. So I never used one on the show. I kept them for very special things,
Yep.
but I did use it to handwrite my notes for our final show about.
Oh,
I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anybody. And this is the only time one of the Dave blue cards was used on our show. Um, and I'm not throwing this out either. I actually took it out of a frame to show you here because I figured the glare wouldn't look good.
yeah.
Uh, there are lots of little things, I'm sure. We did uh, a bit where I was going through a box of my old things, and this actually happened. And I found my writer's submission to the Late Show I had made back in 2000, right out of college. And among
Hmm.
the things I had to submit were a couple of top 10 lists
Yep.
of topics they chose. And so I did one on the show, and I explained the whole thing. I brought out my box of things. I showed my old blankie, which is weird, but anyway, that came out too. We did a tribute to Alan Coulter by doing
Oh,
the celebrity interview segment, but I got permission from Steve Young, who had been on the show. He
yep.
asked the writers, I think it was the Carter,
Carter
Carter,
Bays.
yeah.
Yep.
He got permission. He asked them if it was okay if we did it. So we did
Yep.
we did a parody of Alan Coulter's celebrity interview, complete with the introduction for me going on stage that night was, and now a guy who grew up idolizing Don LaHerman, which is very much like you need to know a few things to understand that reference.
Yep.
Uh, so we did a tribute to Alan that way. I had emailed Alan about coming on the show, and he was hoping post COVID he could, and then he passed away. So that
Yeah.
was one we never had on the show, but would have loved to have had him on the show. So there were a lot. There were a
Yep.
lot of noticeable things, but also not so noticeable things that we kind of slip in. But every show there was a picture of Dave behind my desk, and he saw it on the way out, and he we had the guy on the phone call mentioned to Dave that I interned for Don Imus, and he saw the picture of Don Imus and the picture of him, and he tapped it on the way out. And there was something in that moment, the combination of him walking out and tapping that picture of Imus and looking at me. I'm glad that was the final moment he had on stage because I had a really hard time after that keeping it together.
I can only imagine. That's so beautiful. Oh my God, just Dan, you just body blow after body blow after body blow of sentimentality here is just it's amazing to hear this.
But
I
it's
know I
all
want to finish it.
it is all Dave though. That's the thing.
Yeah,
I was just along for the ride, and I prepared for it. I prepared for it for almost 40
I
years,
was gonna say, yeah, decades.
So I'm happy I didn't like I said, I'm happy I didn't wet myself. That's
Not only that, you stayed present. It was very clear watching it that you were present, like you were really forward and alert and present. And I just felt that. And even on the reflection of it, the gifts of the reflection, like you said, you hope you never ever forget them. They're going to be with you as long as your mind allows it. Clearly, because they permeated in such a beautiful personal way. Um, did you have people that were there from the very beginning to the very end? And I want to the idea that you're able to, even beforehand, and you and I didn't really do much of a pre-interview, but it's very, very clear that you are extremely grateful for your team. Everybody who was there, clearly you're grateful for every incarnation, everybody who was there at the beginning and maybe didn't make it to the end and whatnot. But I think about your band. I think about like when every clip that I've watched, coming back from commercials and things like that, it's very clear that you had a very big rapport with many of these people that worked with you. And I wanted to give you kind of the opportunity to kind of talk about that because our show is a great our tagline, a celebration of the greatest body of broadcast work in history, that of David Letterman and Company. No offense, Nite Show was awesome, but David Letterman and Company, that's what this show is. It's a celebration of that.
Yeah.
And the Company is where I find such fascination, and talking to the company themselves, it is very clear that is the case with the Nite Show. And I wanted to give you kind of the opportunity to talk a little bit about that, unless you got nothing, of course, and then we can just move on. But I don't think that that's going to be the case.
No, there's a lot. The people that were with me since 1997, the first version, there were two people. One is a guy named Mike Borgia, who more recently was the drummer for the house band, Brian Netto and the Nite Show band. When we started, he was running audio, he'd run camera, he'd do whatever it took.
Yep.
And the other is Luke Bushard, who is combination co-executive producer and cue card guy. He was both Robert Morton and Tony Mendez all at the same time. Uh, he was with me since '97 as well, and similarly, he ran camera. He did whatever it took back in the early days, and he had the institutional knowledge that was. Sometimes I would forget things, and he'd remind me, like just of any number of things or reasons why we should do something or shouldn't do something. He was that like right hand man from an institutional knowledge and history of the show perspective.
Yep.
The other executive producer with me was Rodney Verrill. He's been with us since 2010 in his role at the New England School of Communications. He is the right hand man in terms of like, hey, here's this crazy idea. Can we put a bagpipe band out on the street and have them be a musical guest? And he
Oh,
would figure out the technical aspects of making all of that work.
yep.
He figured out technical aspects, or his team would, I guess, at NESCOM. But he would be that person to take the vision and see it through to fruition if it were at all possible.
Hmm.
The mentioned doing a show at a contest winner's house never, ever, ever, ever would have happened without Rodney making, God, I don't even know how many hours worth of work to make that a thing.
Yep.
But the other, like, unlike a regular executive producer, he had to not only find a way to make it work, but also make it a beneficial experience for his students, because his first priority, first job was at the college. And something I haven't mentioned on this podcast, but our crew were students at the New England School of Communications at Husson University. So the camera operators, the audio technicians, the live sound people, the broadcast audio people, the entertainment production people were all students getting experience. And NESCOM and Rodney in particular trusted the vision for this. And I'm happy to say that I think it met or exceeded expectations. When their students would get giddy about putting a microphone on Patrick Dempsey, getting him mic'd up to go for his segment, or David Letterman,
Hmm.
or being able to mix live audio for our annual production of Christmas Baby, Please Come Home. That's another intersection that I somehow forgot.
Yep.
Uh, that was a big deal for them. And these kids have gone on to very big positions within the world of entertainment, not just because of our show, but because
No.
of the entire experience they got at that school.
Yep.
And Rodney was I think the lead magic maker for all of that to kind of bridge what we wanted to do with what makes sense for students to do and make it beneficial for everybody.
Yeah.
Uh, and also, you mentioned the house band. Our house band started as a four-piece. Brian Netto on trumpet, Brian Cattell on keys, Mike Borgia on drums, Bob Roman on bass.
Yep.
It grew to a seven-piece that Brian Netto became the band leader, Brian Netto and the Nite Show band. And they, like Paul and the band, again, structured after the Late Show,
Of course.
they would have a specific song for every guest. And I think that's something that's lost these days with the late night shows, as good as they are.
Yep.
It's lost with some of these late night shows. I don't know that they're picking out specific music for every guest that walks through the door. Um,
Would they
Brian
do
did.
it to make themselves laugh sometimes? Like again, you think Marv Albert coming out to Dreamweaver because he's got the like that's such a beautiful little. I
Yeah.
talk to Will about that stuff all the time, and I just there was so much thought put into it. Would they do that as well?
Yeah. There
Yeah,
were some
that's
that were just funny. There were some I didn't expect that they would. Sometimes I would float ideas, and then I wouldn't know until the guest walked out that they had learned the piece. And sometimes they were way out of left field.
yep,
And then there were others. Noel Paul Stuckey was on our show a few times. He lives in Maine, but he's from Peter, Paul, and Mary. He's the
yep.
Paul, Peter, Paul, and Mary. And one of their biggest songs was the wedding song. And so the band did a very jazzy version of the wedding song when he walked out. Um, and of course, Noel Paul Stuckey recognized it immediately,
Hmm.
stopped, pointed at him, big smile on his face, thumbs up. And that meant the world, musician to musician. That meant the world to them
Yep.
that he not only recognized it, but liked it. And we got that a lot from people who recognized the work that they were doing. Not only that, but like Paul and the band, they backed up a fair number of musicians too. They backed up a world-class opera singer who's performed all over the world, who
Hmm.
did a version of I Love Paris that was an arietta that went into a jazz version, and they did it. They backed up.
Rehearsed how much rehearsal? A couple of run throughs in the day, and that's it because you're setting the setup, and then you got to tear
Yep.
down. So,
Sound check. Sound check is their
oh
rehearsal.
man, that's a high
Yeah,
wire.
it is. They
That
backed
shows their
up.
talent right there.
Yeah, they are super talented. And Mike Borgia, the drummer who I mentioned, I called him before we started this version of the show, and I said, "Can you put together a band?" I didn't know the show was going to go on for 15 years.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what to expect. I thought he might call some college friends and get them back together. I did not expect that he was going to put together an all-star, like literally an all-star group of professional musicians. Brian Netto, the band leader for the last 11, 12 years of the show, he played in bands with Frankie Valli and just like major stars that were touring through and stopped in Bangor. Brian was one of the first people they'd call. These are
Wow.
good, high quality professional musicians that somehow we were lucky enough to have on our show.
Oh, that's incredible.
And I
And it
also
was
should
funny, to go back to
that
Dave for a second, coming back from one of the commercials. One of the things that I would always love, I love how Dave loved music. I love music, and and that was very clear early on. How much Dave loved music, and many times coming back, between bumpers, you come back and he's watching because at the Ed Sullivan Theater they played full songs during the commercial break. I assume that that's the same with you guys, as opposed to 8 bars of this and then another 8 bar, going out and then another 8 bars coming back in. And it was very cool to watch Dave after one of the breaks. It's visible that he was enjoying the music, and that must have been a little feather in the cap too for you. It seemed that he really enjoyed that experience, and the music was a part of that. And it's such a beautiful thing that you had such a collaboration for so long. The depth shows up. I mean, that time that shows up there, the depth is there. So I love hearing you talk about that aspect of it. Clearly, something that you took from your love of Letterman as well.
Yeah, he liked the band a lot, and one of the things that I heard that our band didn't hear in the taping was when he came out and they played the Late Show theme. Wild applause at the end, and he turns and goes, "Thank you, Paul." And he giggled like a schoolgirl, but they didn't hear it because they have a monitor in front of them, but it was so loud.
Yep.
There was no way they could have heard anything that he or I was saying while the audience was still cheering loudly.
Yep.
So I told our band leader about it that night, and he laughed like hell. He thought that was the coolest thing. Um, but yeah, our band always played through breaks unless if we had a musical guest that needed like a second quick sound check just to make sure everything was in a good place,
Yep.
they would stop down for that. But
Yep.
otherwise, that was like Dave said about Paul and the band. That was half of the joy of coming to see a live taping of ours is you get a little mini concert from this group of musicians, and that's one of the things. Like Dave said, that's one of the things I do already miss. I got a front row seat to some of the best live music in our state, and like you, I'm a lover of music, and I do already miss that.
Ah, yeah, there you go. There's a piece of reflection right there, and not a surprising one at all. That makes a lot of sense because the energy. I mean, you go into a room like that. Well, and I mean, you had been to the Ed Sullivan Theater. You understand that the Late Show certainly did not start the moment Dave came out. It didn't start with even the Q&A. It started when Paul and the band kicked in and they started that just naturally got the energy up, and your band clearly had the ability to do that as well and get the audience up to a lovely frothy excitement before you even had to walk out there and do anything at all. I mean, that's what a home ice advantage that is. I gotta. This is a weird question to throw in here. I'll tell you this: growing up in Western Canada, and I'm certain that this would not be the first time you've heard this sentiment, or I'm pretty sure anyway. My um, my knowledge of Maine had to do with one man, and it's because I grew up a huge Stephen King fan. I was a massive Stephen King fan. Like, The Dark Tower is my favorite piece of fantasy writing of anything. No offense to Tolkien and all those other people. I'm such a fan of his, and he would always talk about. He was so proud. He clearly was so proud to be from Maine, and being as successful as he was, once that train started going, he could have gone anywhere, but did not. Kind of did the same thing that you did, and I can't help but see the parallel. And I forgive me for my ignorance here. Any Stephen King connections?
Only through comedy.
Yep.
So it's funny that you say that Stephen King and I have a parallel because I can tell you his home is one of his many homes is
Yes.
far larger than where I
Yeah.
live.
Yeah. He's done pretty
So
well
I
for
think the
himself. That
parallel
guy, local
stops
guy, done well.
hometown. um, we did a parody of it when that came out, and I think that might have been the only connection. No, that's not true. That's not true. There were a couple of connections actually. We had somebody on who had a website. Her name is Lori. Her website was TP Travels with Lori.
Okay.
She would go to different TV and movie locations and get pictures and write about it. And I thought it was the coolest website. And I reached out one day and was like, "Hey, any chance you want to come to Bangor, Maine, and your TV travels and come to our set?" And she's like, "Sure, that sounds like fun." And I said, "Would you be a guest?" And she's like, "Oh, that's an entirely different ask. Sure." So we devised a bit where we ran around to different Stephen King shooting locations that we shot like 2 or 3 months ahead of time.
Yep.
So she came up for that and then went home, and then she came up to do our show and went back. She's based in New York. And so we did that bit, and that was kind of fun. Um, I asked him to be a guest several times,
Yep.
and much like almost everybody who's been on our show, he doesn't need to. And I get the
No.
sense from seeing him around town, he'll wear a Red Sox cap and walk his dog, or be in Shaw's, or which is a supermarket.
Hmm.
Um, he'll go in a bookstore sort of quietly. He was at a book reading his son did, sitting in the back row by himself. He's an introvert,
Yeah.
and I think he has been helpful with other things that I've been involved in. So I don't think it's a me issue. I
Yep.
have a nonprofit that gives books to first graders, and he and his wife's foundation, the Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation, made
Yep.
a sizable gift to that organization. He helped me with a campaign I was working on for a new library in Ellsworth, Maine.
Yep.
He provided a voiceover, and I wrote a script for it. And his person got back to me and said, "Steve says this is perfect." And I was like, "Whoa, the world's greatest writer thinks my writing is perfect? Okay."
Yeah. Take
Hang
that.
that. So he's been very helpful, and he gives back to this community like nobody else.
Yep.
So I have nothing to be sad about him never coming on our show.
Hmm.
I certainly wished he would have. Um, but I also get it. It's an uncomfortable thing to do. I've seen him on the national shows. He does a really, really good job, but
Hmm.
I don't know what goes into that for him. I don't know if that's like his least favorite thing in the world to do. So if he doesn't have to do it, he probably just doesn't want to. And I respect that. I would, he was, so Dave was dream guest number one. Stephen King was a close second. That's not true. He was second. He wasn't a close second. Dave had,
Yeah. No. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but
I get it.
So I wish we had gotten him on the show, but I fully respect the fact that it's just not something he was interested in doing.
Yeah. And shout out, by the way, to anybody who, has a creative outlet and wants to potentially express it. And I think it goes beyond writing, but if you read Stephen King's memoir on writing, if there's not, it's something that will inspire you to chase after whatever it is that you're looking for and be good at it, especially obviously in writing. My wife and I wrote a book a few years ago, and I reread Steve's book, and it was such a good one. I appreciate the fact that, like, geography, again, I'm from Western Canada. Portland was always Oregon to me, and whenever I would read in one of his books, Portland, oh, okay, and it taught me, Derry's a place in Maine, right? Derry, another one, I
No,
think.
that's what he calls what is Bangor. So if
Oh,
you come
that's
to
what he called.
Bangor,
Okay, there
Maine,
you go, there you go. Yeah, and I felt a kinship to Maine because of that, and so I appreciate you letting me take that little aside.
of
Um,
course.
Before I get to kind of the I knew how I wanted to finish this, and I think you'll be okay with the way that I wanted to finish it. Was there anything else that we have gone, any other rabbit holes that we didn't jump down that you wanted to jump down before I kind of move into the way that I wanted to maybe close the show here today?
Yeah, I want to say I emphasize again, the show would not have been as successful if it was if not for the New England School of Communications at Husson
Mm,
University and their students and their faculty and staff, and also our tremendous band, Brian Netto and the Nite Show Band. I mentioned who was in the band at the start.
yep.
I will say the band we finished with was Brian Netto on trumpet, Dave Clark on guitar, Bob Roman on bass, who gave me bass guitar lessons, by the way, when I was a kid, Mike Borgia
Oh,
on drums. Steve Orlovsky on saxophone, Jim Winters on trombone, and Lincoln Blake on keyboards. Mark Nason was our announcer in the final season, and he was also our audience guy. He did some funny stuff with us, and was always like he was our audience warm up guy and human applause sign, and he was great. Steve Esty did the role of human applause sign for a long time, and he was great. Joe Kennedy was our announcer from like 2001 to 2020 or so, with that hiatus in between. A lot of funny moments with him. Rich Norton was our first announcer, who is sadly no longer with us. And our first house band on the early version was a group called the Literal Trio. Carl Literal was the professor of jazz at the University of Maine, and it was his wife and son, Terry and Arthur, who played keyboard and drums, and he was on saxophone. Um, None of this would have been where it is if not for all of those people and some of the other people that I've mentioned. And Sue Potvin was the segment producer with Dave, and she made that segment sizzle. She really did. And we were lucky to have all of these people with us over the years to make something that is uniquely Maine, and I hope something people don't forget for a long time.
well, and that's going to bring me into how we want to end it. And again, I just because I have such a high regard for the guy, he doesn't realize how much I really like him. I just love that McEntee was part of your show. I just love that so much. Do you have a favorite McEntee? I'm putting you on the spot here. Is there a favorite McEntee line or something that he threw at you that I'm putting you on the spot, Dan? I don't mean to do that.
And here's why. So I developed monologue every
Yep.
week
Yep.
for every show, and because I did not want to, um, I don't even want to say play favorites. I didn't want to get into a rut. I would take the names off the jokes when they were submitted to me and scramble them so that there was, uh, so it didn't sound like too much of one person's voice. I wanted it to have a variation of perspectives, and I knew the joke that I told when Tom Bones Malone was there, that first joke I told from Mike, because I read through his first and I was like, oh my God, all of these are hilarious. How am I going to put these down?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I got into this routine of just scrambling everything. I didn't know who wrote what, and I would go back and look after the fact. So I get nothing. I'm sorry.
That's great. Yeah, you got nothing, but you got something. That's a lot of thoughtfulness there. I just appreciate, I appreciate that. And there's something Letterman-esque about that as well. I mean, that's very cool. Like, you think about some of these top 10 lists and how the staffs would be given the opportunity to all submit things, and sometimes it was the writer's assistant or somebody who was manning the desk on the writer's floor or whatever that would get a line in, and things like that. I love the potpourri aspect of that. That's a fantastic answer. And by the way, I was going to save this when I shoot the intro, because I'm going to shoot the intro afterwards, because it makes more sense to do that to me. But I do want to note it here with you on here. Again, another thing that appeals to me so much about this process, and the fact that you had the students doing this. So many people who worked in the Letterman world talked about the level of experience they got through making the show, and what they moved on to do. I always go back to Andy Carson. Andy Carson was an intern there for 1 year. He was, or not even a year, it was a half a year, with Paul, and he's moved on and he's become the Good Morning Oregon guy for the last 20 something years. Just in his area where he grew up, he's that guy. He walks down the street and people see him all the time. And he goes back to his time at Letterman, and the idea that he was able to get practical experience out of this. You think these writers who would come up with an extra, well, they became executive producers because they had to go and coordinate with everybody, from the camera people, to the logistics, props, things like that, the editor, all of that, and they had to make these little mini movies, things like that. The fact is, it's very, very awesome that you and your team got to be that for a whole bunch of people who are going to end up in the creative or broadcasting, for careers, or they'll at least, at bare minimum, have scratched the itch. And I just want to salute you while we're on camera here to say, hey, that's really cool that you could give back to some of these people throughout all these years, and they're going to have similar stories, and the echoes to me of Letterman world just done in Maine. To me, that is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I just want to throw that at you and say congratulations on that as well.
Thank you. A couple of notes on that too. One is that for our final show, a number of alumni from NESCOM came back to our show to be there. And when I got wind that it was happening, I knew we were producing a segment that would kind of show some of the things we've had them do with us. And I said to Mark Nason, who I mentioned, he also works at NESCOM. And I said, do you think we can get some of those alumni on stage and I will introduce them after that segment? He goes, yeah, we can do anything. I didn't know how many people were going to be there. I guess in my mind, I had thought maybe a dozen. And when our flyaway wall went up and they were revealed, there were at least 3 dozen of the alumni there who came. Very few of them still live in Bangor. So they came here on their own dime to come see our final show and to be there. And I actually couldn't see it in the monitor because our executive producer, cue card guy, Luke Bushard, was standing in front of my monitor. Like, come on, Luke, you've been doing the show 15 years. You don't know where the stupid monitor is? But anyway, so I walk around the corner to go shake their hands, and I couldn't believe how many people were there. The other point I want to make is Dave said the same thing in one of the segments where he said, in his case, he got to give people careers, and his wife reminds him of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how gratifying it was what I said to follow that up about the number of seeds that Dave has planted for comedians and radio people and people that don't get to do this. And to tell him what an inspiration he was. And thankfully, I made him laugh in that because I know he hates that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's almost like I got some sort of like legend closure where I was able to say something to him in a meaningful way that I think resonated and also made him laugh in the moment. That's one of those moments, like hopefully decades and decades from now, when I'm on my deathbed, I can look at that and be like, yeah, that felt really good, because it did. I got to tell him exactly what I thought, and that was wonderful.
This is how I wanted to end the show. The cool thing about Dave's appearance is it felt like, yes, you were very clearly, of course, you were having the dream come true moment, the storybook ending, that kind of a thing. But it almost felt like there was, maybe it was 51-49. Okay, but the 49, now, you know what? It might have been 51 the other way. It's very clear how much you love Bangor and Maine. And it felt like you doing that was giving a huge gift to the people in that audience and beyond. And it felt like you got just as big of a kick out of that than you did the personal part. And it was a beautiful mixture of things. And that's that. Dave's talked about this. The thing about being generous or things is it's self-serving. It feels so good to do that. And when you saw the roar, felt the roar of applause, the surprise, and just how many people were so delighted by what it was, and it's only through an amazing alchemy of events. Yes, you doing this thing for decades to get to this point, you building it over time, building momentum, building an audience, building all of this stuff, and then the clear Letterman influence on your show, and then having him. It felt like you were just as excited to give everybody around you in your area a gift, and at the same time you received the gift at the same, and that's what it felt like. It really felt like you were giving back to not just that community theater audience, but to your area in general. And I just thought that would be a cool way to kind of close our conversation here, because that's just, it feels like that's who you are, Dan.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a big part of it for me. And part of it was selfish,
Of course.
because it wasn't just like all the late night talk shows. Tickets to come to our show were free as well. So like it was people came, and I promised them that there would be a surprise guest, and that was as much as people knew.
Yep.
So I think it was a guest that likely exceeded expectations for a lot of people in that audience. Um, and Bangor has been very good to me in this show. And so, yeah, part of it was that. But also, there were people who I personally invited there. They also didn't know who would be there. But my cousin, John, who has one of the greatest sense of humors of anybody I know, came up from Salem, Massachusetts. And I can remember we'd spend Thanksgivings there for years. And I remember he and I would always go into his parents' bedroom and watch Letterman, because everybody was still up playing games and having fun, and you couldn't hear the TV where all the adults were. So we'd go in and watch Letterman, and I was like, he has to be there for this. So I didn't tell him why, but I told him he had to be there, and he came. My high school band director, who I would waste his time every day before band telling him about what Letterman did the night before, and I would work on material. And he was there, and he was in like the third or fourth row. And during one of the commercials, when Dave was out shaking hands with people, he ran up like a kid, and I got to watch him run up to David Letterman like a child and shake his hand, grinning ear to ear. So many little stories like that. Between family and friends and coworkers who were there, who had no idea he was coming through the door, and then just general people in the community. There was a guy next door to my office last week. I think they're doing renovations next door to the building next door to our office. And I was walking out to my car. He was pulling out. He rolls down his window and he says, "Hey, that show with Letterman was magical." I said, "Oh, thank you." I mean, I don't know who he is, but I feel like I hope my hope in winding this down was always that people just remember the show, and hopefully positively. Even if they hated it, though, I hope they remember the show. And I think that David Letterman created an opportunity to not only remember the show, but to remember this one moment in Maine television history that is unlike anything else this state has seen before.
Yeah.
And I talked to a friend of mine who writes for Kimmel about it. And I said, because he said Dave's got to be the biggest star to visit. I said, well, Jerry Seinfeld's coming this summer to play at our concert venue. And he said, but Jerry Seinfeld's coming there because he's being routed there. People know he's coming. People are buying tickets to go.
Yeah.
You surprised people with David Letterman, who is probably not only the greatest talk show host of all time, but the greatest talk show guest of all time. And you had him on your show, and people had no idea he was coming. And I was like, yeah, you're right. That's a pretty big deal. And I need to own some of that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you do. I'm very glad that you do, and I'm glad that the imposter syndrome doesn't rear its head at this point here, because it was big, and I'm glad that you know that, and I'm glad that you're being told that, and it's being reinforced. And if ever there's any doubt about that, hey, call me up. Well, I'll make sure you get that back again from my end of things, because I just, again, it was such there was any time that I can have a vicarious moment, and there's lots of them when it comes to Dave and company, and I have them for other things that I love in my life as well. But the vicariousness. It was funny. As this was happening, I was going through. I've talked about it on the show a little bit. My father was passing away, and it was all happening, and it happened at the very end of April, and it was it was a long ordeal to get to that, and you know, there were some things that I did to kind of comfort myself, um, and following along what you guys were doing. It was like I couldn't believe, I was so excited by it, and it actually transported me out of what I was dealing with at home, and personally it transported me to a place of joy just because of the vicarious nature of it, and that's across the continent. And really, I'm so impressed and happy for you, that you did have this. You talk about the idea of a storybook ending, and who knows what the next few chapters are going to be, because Stephen King talks about this. He says the story never ends. It's where the author chooses to stop, telling the tale, but it always does move on. Those characters, whatever they are always going to move on, but it's just where the author decides to tell the story. And there's a huge chapter break here. Whatever it is that you move into next to scratch this itch, whatever that is, or if there is nothing else. I'm really, really happy for you, Dan, that you've had this. I'm really grateful to have this conversation with you today. You are a friend of the show, as far as I'm concerned. I hope our paths cross more in the future. But I just want to say congratulations on your run. It's an amazing thing that you did. I'll talk about it again when I shoot the intro here, but the idea that you were the last man standing when it came to watching this medium that we grew up with, that really was a best friend for us, this medium of television, the fact that you had, the last regional late night show, and you went out with such a beautiful ending. To me, it just can't be understated, and I'm so excited for you. I'm grateful to know you. I'm grateful that you came on the show here, and just congratulations, man. And I hope I didn't make you feel too uncomfortable with that adulation.
Not at all. I've learned watching Dave's retirement and how many people said kind things to him and he sort of brushed off. I
Yeah,
remember thinking, I wish he'd just take some of those. And so this is not an apples to apples comparison, of course. I know I am not David Letterman, but I did learn from that moment when somebody says something kind and sincere, they in all likelihood mean it. So I've learned to accept it and appreciate it. So thank you for all of those kind words. It was an absolute pleasure, and I hope there's something in my life that comes along that is as fulfilling and gratifying creatively rather.
yep.
But if not, then I am still one happy individual, and I'm happy we were able to make this work.
Absolutely. Um, Before we close out, the Letterman podcast has one sponsor only. You're familiar with it. It was talked about during Letterman's appearance on the show, hello-deli.com. One of your only places now, and Walter and the team do have at the pants store. There is some stuff that you can get, but it's not the same stuff that you get from Rupert's. Hello-deli.com, the only place to get official late night with David Letterman, or late show with David Letterman merchandise, I should say. Mugs and hats and shirts and whatnot. We just have Rupert. There's another appearance of Rupert coming on the show here very, very soon. You got the mug from hello-deli.com. Rupert sent you that mug, right?
Well, actually, I got it in person back
Oh,
when he was selling them
yep.
at the Hello Deli. But yes, I got it from Rupert. And is there a nicer individual, by the way, than
Nope.
Rupert?
Nope. He's the
Man,
word kindness turned into a human. That's what he is.
he sure is. Yeah, I'm going to do all of my holiday shopping at hello-deli.com.
There you go. You've heard it. You've heard it here. I could say it all I want, but Dan Cashman, hey, You heard it first. All your holiday shopping and more at hello-deli.com. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show here. I hope our paths do cross more. Sometimes we do some of these friends of the show, collaborations where we all just kind of get together and talk. Steve Young comes on those, and some of these other people or whatever. You're gonna start getting on the invite list for those as we do more of these here. This has been another episode of the Letterman Podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night. Well, that was like butter.
Overcoat and underpants.